Have you ever caught yourself replaying an argument in your head long after it happened, only to notice that the person acts toward you exactly as you imagined? Or perhaps you've worried about something until it became real in your life. What if I told you that this isn't coincidence, it's creation? The words you whisper to yourself in the silence of your mind are not harmless. They are commands that shape your world. Every human being is constantly engaged in a silent conversation with themselves. This dialogue may not always be noticed, but it is the most influential voice in anyone's life. The words repeated internally have the power to elevate or destroy, to create opportunity or to shut it down, to inspire faith or to lock someone in fear. Unlike conversations with others, which may last minutes or hours, the inner conversation continues endlessly, shaping perception and identity with every thought and feeling. What you repeatedly say within yourself is far more important than anything said to you by the outside world, because the outer world ultimately mirrors back what has been established within. Consider for a moment how easily inner conversation can dictate mood. When someone constantly tells themselves that they are unworthy, their posture changes, their energy becomes heavy, and others respond to them accordingly. On the other hand, when the inner dialogue affirms strength and confidence, it is not merely psychological comfort. It radiates outward as a presence that others feel. This is why two people with the same circumstances can live entirely different lives. One constantly rehearses limitation in their mind, while the other rehearses success and possibility. The stage may be the same, but the script being read internally determines the performance of life. The mind cannot separate what is imagined from what is real. When you repeat a thought often enough, it becomes accepted by the subconscious, and the subconscious, like fertile soil, brings forth whatever seed has been planted. Saying to yourself, "I never succeed," is planting a seed of failure, and life, like a faithful gardener, will water that seed until you harvest exactly what you affirmed. But replacing that inner line with "everything I touch prospers" plants an entirely different seed, one that must also manifest when it is given consistent attention. The soil does not discriminate between weeds and flowers, it simply grows what is planted. Similarly, your inner conversation does not judge whether your words are helpful or harmful, it only accepts them and makes them real. Every external circumstance in life has its root in an internal dialogue. The relationship that thrives or collapses often begins with what you silently say about the other person in your heart. If you constantly tell yourself, "They don't respect me, they don't listen, they don't care," that script eventually colors your interactions until the relationship confirms your inner narrative. But when you internally affirm, "They love me deeply, they cherish me, they understand me," then even subtle shifts in your tone, expression, and energy reinforce that story, and reality conforms. Others may believe they are choosing freely how to respond, but in truth they are often reflecting back the unspoken assumptions you have already entertained within yourself. This is why self-concept is inseparable from inner conversation. A person who continually declares internally, "I am overlooked, I am not chosen, I am unworthy," will live out experiences that echo those assumptions. Their inner dialogue forms an identity, and that identity dictates the roles they are assigned in life. Conversely, someone who repeats, "I am valuable, I am chosen, I am powerful," shapes a self-concept that naturally attracts respect, recognition, and love. It is not external validation that creates self-worth. It is the unbroken conversation within that establishes it first, and the world obediently follows. The most striking feature of inner conversation is its persistence. Unlike a passing thought, an inner dialogue is rehearsed again and again, sometimes for years, until it becomes so natural that it feels like reality itself. People often say, "That's just the way life is," without realizing that it is simply the way they have talked about life for so long. Life bends to match the dominant inner narrative. If the dialogue is negative, circumstances will continue to confirm that perspective, creating a loop that seems impossible to break. Yet changing the conversation begins to change the pattern. It may not shift instantly, but as the new words take root, the outer world gradually adjusts. Another powerful aspect of inner conversation is its influence on emotion. Words create feelings, and feelings magnetize experiences. When the mind repeats, "I am secure, I am provided for, I am safe," a sense of calm and confidence fills the heart. That feeling becomes a state of being, and the state of being attracts situations aligned with it. On the other hand, repeating, "I am in danger, I will fail, nothing works for me," generates fear, despair, and anxiety, which then draw in events that reinforce those same feelings. Emotion is the fuel of inner dialogue, and inner dialogue is the steering wheel of emotion. Together, they drive the entire experience of reality. Even the imagination is guided by inner conversation. People imagine scenarios that match the words they habitually repeat. If the dialogue is full of doubt and criticism, the imagination will paint pictures of failure and rejection. If the dialogue is filled with assurance and confidence, the imagination will create vivid images of success and joy. These images are not idle fantasies, they are the blueprint from which reality is constructed. The inner dialogue supplies the raw material, and the imagination molds it into form. Once formed, reality cannot help but reflect it. Because of this, mastery of inner conversation is mastery of life itself. It requires awareness, listening carefully to the words constantly spoken in the silence of the mind. Many are shocked when they pause to notice just how negative or repetitive their inner voice can be. But the moment awareness enters, change becomes possible. By consciously replacing harmful words with empowering ones, by rehearsing success rather than failure, by affirming worth instead of lack, the direction of life shifts. The change may seem subtle at first, but with persistence, the inner dialogue becomes a new reality, and the outer world follows obediently. As it always does, imagination is not merely a place of idle daydreams or fleeting fantasies. It is the workshop of creation where the unseen takes form before appearing in the visible world. Every invention, every breakthrough, every transformation humanity has ever witnessed first existed in the mind of someone who dared to imagine it. The airplane existed as a vision before it touched the sky. The skyscraper was once a picture held in thought before it pierced the clouds, and even the smallest personal victories in life begin as imagined scenes long before they are lived out in experience. The images and dialogues that arise in the inner world are not insignificant. They are blueprints that external reality faithfully follows. The mind does not treat imagination as fiction. Instead, it processes these inner pictures as experiences, embedding them deeply in the subconscious. This is why an imagined event can produce real physical responses. A person visualizing themselves standing on a high cliff may feel the rush of fear in their stomach, or someone replaying a joyful reunion in their mind may shed tears as though it is happening in the moment. The subconscious cannot distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically real. Because of this, imagination is the true architect of life. It creates a template that the outer world mirrors. Every inner dialogue is a conversation of imagination. When you argue silently with someone in your mind, you are not merely remembering, you are rehearsing a scene that may soon play out. When you affirm your success in vivid detail, you are not just wishing, you are constructing the stage upon which success must arrive. These inner dialogues and images are sketches drawn on the canvas of consciousness, and once drawn, they influence thought, emotion, and behavior until the sketch hardens into reality. This creative force does not operate only in grand visions, it is constantly at work in the small, everyday moments of life. A person who imagines rejection before entering a room may unconsciously project insecurity that causes others to withdraw, thereby fulfilling their imagined fear. Someone who pictures themselves being warmly welcomed often carries an energy of openness that invites that very reception. The imagination works silently, yet its influence is undeniable. Whatever is entertained consistently within it must eventually be expressed outwardly. The act of living in the end relies entirely on imagination. To live in the end means to occupy the state of already being or having what you desire, and imagination is the tool that makes this possible. When you vividly see yourself living the life you want, when you hear the conversations you would hear if it were true, when you feel the emotions that belong to that fulfilled state, you are not indulging in fantasy. You are conditioning your subconscious to accept that reality. Once accepted, the subconscious rearranges behavior, perception, and even circumstances to bring that image to life. This is why so many spiritual and philosophical teachings emphasize vision and faith. Vision is simply imagination directed with purpose, and faith is the persistence of holding that vision as real before it appears. The creative force of imagination does not require external proof to operate. In fact, it demands that you believe without proof, because proof comes after the image has been fully accepted internally. The blueprint must be drawn before the structure can be built. Imagination provides a drawing, and reality constructs it. Even the past is subject to the influence of imagination. Memories are often rehearsed in ways that keep people trapped, but imagination allows for revision. By reimagining a painful event with a different outcome, by altering the inner picture to one of strength, dignity, or triumph, the emotional weight of the past changes, and that new version reshapes the present. Imagination not only designs the future but also rewrites the meanings of the past, liberating the individual from cycles of regret and pain. The power of imagination also explains why limiting beliefs are so destructive. If someone constantly imagines failure, ridicule, or lack, those images act as commands to the subconscious, which then generates behaviors and outcomes aligned with them. It is not that life is against them, it is that their imagination has drawn a blueprint that reality is faithfully following. The subconscious does not question whether the image is wanted or unwanted, it simply accepts and expresses it. To change life, the image must change. This realization carries profound responsibility. No longer can imagination be dismissed as play or dismissed as fantasy. It is the origin of experience, the silent engine behind every action and every result. To misuse imagination by dwelling on fear, resentment, or doubt is to unknowingly create realities filled with those very conditions. But to use imagination consciously, to picture abundance, harmony, success, and love, is to direct the creative force toward a future worth living. Imagination, when harnessed deliberately, becomes the most powerful tool for transformation. It requires discipline to persist in a vision when the outer world shows the opposite, but persistence is the key. The outer world is always slower than the inner blueprint, but given time, it must align. Reality is malleable, and imagination is the sculptor's hand shaping it into form. Every life, no matter how ordinary it may seem, is the product of countless imagined scenes, repeated inner dialogues, and vivid pictures once entertained in the silence of the mind. To awaken to this truth is to awaken to freedom. The freedom to choose the pictures you hold, the conversations you rehearse, the world you build within. And when the world within changes, the world without cannot remain the same. Human relationships are often seen as unpredictable, shaped by the free will of others, by chance encounters, or by forces outside of our control. Yet a deeper truth reveals itself when we look closer. The way people treat us, the way they show up in our lives, and the roles they play are often direct reflections of our own inner assumptions and beliefs. The phrase, "everyone is you pushed out," captures this truth with clarity. It means that the thoughts and expectations we hold about others within our own mind are projected outward and mirrored back to us through their behavior. At first glance, this may appear impossible. Surely people act as they choose, independent of what we think or believe. But consider how often your assumptions have subtly influenced the way others respond. When you expect someone to be cold or distant, your tone, posture, and energy often carry that assumption. In return, the other person unconsciously aligns with the role you have cast them in. On the other hand, when you approach someone in the silent belief that they admire and respect you, your very presence shifts, and their behavior reflects back the assumption you held. The world is a mirror, and the mirror cannot reflect anything except what is placed before it. This principle extends beyond isolated encounters. It shapes entire relationships. A person who carries the internal conviction that they are unwanted will often find themselves in situations where they are overlooked or dismissed. This is not because the world has conspired against them, but because their own belief radiates outward, influencing how others see them. Their inner assumption becomes the script others unconsciously follow. Another person who holds the inner conviction that they are cherished and valued will notice people treating them with kindness, attention, and respect. The contrast is not in the people themselves, but in the assumptions being projected upon them. Everyone you meet becomes a screen upon which your inner dialogue is played. If you constantly replay silent arguments in your mind, imagining conflict and rejection, those scenes condition your subconscious, and the outer world rises to confirm them. But when you deliberately imagine harmony, love, and cooperation, those same individuals begin to show up differently. It is not manipulation, it is reflection. People cannot help but mirror back the assumptions you persistently hold about them. This understanding also reveals why certain patterns repeat across different relationships. Someone who believes deep down that they are always betrayed may find betrayal following them from one relationship to the next. Someone who assumes they are always supported finds helpers and allies appearing again and again. The external players may change, but the script is the same, written by the assumptions carried within. Life provides endless actors to fulfill the roles assigned by your beliefs. To change the way others behave toward you, the shift must begin within. Attempting to force others to act differently without revising your assumptions is like trying to change a reflection in the mirror without changing the object in front of it. But when you alter the inner conviction, when you decide that someone respects you, loves you, admires you, or treats you kindly, the mirror must eventually reflect the change. It may not occur instantly, but with persistence, the new assumption solidifies, and the outer world has no choice but to align. This principle is especially powerful in relationships where hurt or misunderstanding has occurred. If you carry resentment, continually imagining the other person as cruel or dismissive, you will notice behaviors that confirm that image. But if you revise the inner dialogue, if you imagine them apologizing, treating you with care, or acting with love, you shift the story. The mind may resist at first, clinging to the evidence of the past, but persistence in the new image gradually rewrites the dynamic. The past does not lock anyone into a fixed pattern, assumptions do. And when assumptions change, behavior must follow. The idea that everyone is you pushed out also teaches responsibility. It removes the illusion that others are solely to blame for the way they treat you. Instead, it invites you to examine what inner beliefs may be calling forth such behavior. While this realization may feel heavy at first, it is ultimately empowering. If your assumptions created an undesirable pattern, your assumptions can also create a better one. The power is never outside of you, it rests entirely within. Even strangers are subject to this law. Think about times when you walked into a room expecting to be ignored, only to find yourself overlooked, or when you carried the assumption of being welcomed, and people gravitated toward you instantly. These are not coincidences, they are reflections. Life is constantly echoing your inner state back to you through others. What makes this principle transformative is that it does not require others to consciously agree or change. They respond because they cannot help but align with the vibration, the energy, and the silent expectations radiating from within you. When you shift how you see them in your imagination, you shift the role they play in your reality. This is why forgiveness, revision, and love are so powerful. By releasing old assumptions and choosing new ones, you rewrite the script of your interactions. Ultimately, everyone is you pushed out means that the entire world is participating in the story you are telling yourself. People are not separate entities acting randomly. They are mirrors reflecting the assumptions you hold about them and about yourself. If you see yourself as respected, others confirm it. If you see yourself as ignored, others confirm it. If you imagine harmony, harmony arises. If you imagine conflict, conflict is unavoidable. The outer world is not an independent force. It is a canvas painted by the brushstrokes of your beliefs and inner dialogue. Living in the end is the practice of embodying the state, of already having what you desire before any physical evidence appears. It is not wishful thinking or empty pretending. It is the conscious choice to accept your desired reality as real within your imagination and inner dialogue until the external world has no choice but to conform. This principle rests on the understanding that consciousness precedes experience, that the inner world of thought and feeling creates the blueprint from which the outer world is built. When your inner dialogue aligns with the end result, reality gradually reorganizes itself to reflect the state you have assumed. To live in the end means to stop approaching your desire as something distant or out of reach. Instead of saying, "I hope it happens one day," or "if only it could be mine," you shift your language, thoughts, and feelings into the position of already possessing it. You imagine yourself speaking, acting, and thinking as the person who has already achieved or received the desire. In doing so, you bypass the limitations of the present circumstance and dwell in the reality of fulfillment. The more vividly and consistently this state is maintained, the more powerful its influence becomes. The mind cannot distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically real. When you carry yourself internally as though your wish is fulfilled, your subconscious accepts that as fact. Once impressed upon the subconscious, this new identity begins to express itself outwardly in ways you may not consciously notice. Your actions, tone of voice, body language, and energy shift subtly to align with the fulfilled state. Others respond differently to you because you are broadcasting a different assumption about yourself. Over time, circumstances bend and rearrange to match the state you have embodied. This principle reveals why so many desires remain unfulfilled. People often imagine the longing for something rather than the end of already having it. When someone continually says within themselves, "I want this, I hope it comes, I need it," their inner dialogue is reinforcing the state of lack. The focus is on not having, and reality continues to reflect not having. Living in the end requires a complete reversal of that approach. Instead of longing, you assume. Instead of hoping, you declare within, "It is already mine, I already am this, I already live here." That inner conviction becomes the seed that reality waters until it grows into tangible form. One of the most practical ways to live in the end is through inner conversations. Instead of mentally rehearsing what you will say or do when the desire arrives, you rehearse conversations as if it has already happened. You imagine a friend congratulating you, or you hear yourself giving thanks for what is already yours. These dialogues impress the mind more deeply than affirmations spoken without feeling, because they mirror the natural way people think and interact. If persisted in, they become second nature, and reality conforms to the conversations already held within. Living in the end also calls for emotional alignment. It is not enough to merely repeat words if the inner feeling contradicts them. To embody the end, you must feel the relief, joy, or satisfaction that naturally accompanies fulfillment. This feeling is the signal that the state has been accepted as real. For example, someone imagining themselves financially secure should feel the calm assurance that comes with abundance, not the anxiety of lack. Someone imagining a loving relationship should feel the warmth and affection of being adored, not the longing of absence. Feeling it real is the bridge between imagination and manifestation. Persistence is the anchor of this practice. The external world often lags behind the inner assumption, and during that delay, old circumstances may appear to contradict the new state. This is where many falter, abandoning the end and returning to doubt. But persistence means holding the inner conviction regardless of appearances. Just as a seed takes time to sprout after being planted, the state of fulfillment takes time to materialize in physical form. The gardener does not dig up the seed to check if it is growing. They trust the process. In the same way, living in the end means trusting that the unseen forces are working and remaining loyal to the vision until it hardens into fact. Even the past can be reshaped through this principle. By revising old memories and imagining them as if they unfolded differently, you alter their effect on your present identity. Instead of carrying wounds that reinforce limitation, you replace them with imagined outcomes that strengthen you. In doing so, you are living in the end of a revised story, and that new story influences how you show up in the present. The end you choose to occupy does not only belong to the future, it can rewrite the past and transform the present simultaneously. Living in the end is not about forcing external change, but about dwelling so completely in the reality of fulfillment that the outer world must eventually follow. Circumstances have no choice but to bend to the inner state that is consistently held. The world is malleable, shaped by the silent persistence of imagination and inner dialogue. By aligning thought, feeling, and assumption with the end result, you step into the role of creator rather than passive observer. And as the end becomes your dwelling place inwardly, it inevitably becomes your dwelling place outwardly. The past is often thought of as something fixed, immovable, and beyond the reach of change. People carry their memories like unalterable records, using them to define who they are, what they can achieve, and how life must continue to unfold. Yet what is remembered about the past is not the event itself, but the interpretation of it, the story replayed in the mind. That story, repeated often enough, becomes a script that continues to influence present behavior and future outcomes. Revision of the past is the practice of consciously rewriting that internal story, choosing new meanings, new outcomes, and new interpretations until the weight of the old memory no longer governs the present. The human mind does not store memories as neutral events. Each moment experienced is filtered through perception, judgment, and emotion. A word spoken in childhood, for example, may echo for decades not because of the word itself, but because of the meaning attached to it at the time. If the interpretation was painful, the memory remains painful, and the person carries it as proof of limitation or unworthiness. But by revising the memory, by imagining the event differently, hearing new words, or picturing a more empowering outcome, the meaning changes, and with it, the emotional imprint is transformed. The past becomes malleable, no longer a prison, but a tool for liberation. Revision works because the subconscious does not distinguish between what actually happened and what is vividly imagined. If you revisit a memory and replace the hurt with healing, the rejection with acceptance, or the failure with success, the subconscious accepts the revised story as fact. Once impressed with the new version, your present self responds differently. You no longer carry the same shame, fear, or anger that once defined you. Instead, the new story generates confidence, peace, and freedom, which ripple forward into every area of life. Consider a person who failed an important exam years ago. If they continually replay the story of failure, telling themselves, "I am not smart enough, I always fall short," that memory becomes a barrier to future success. But if they return to that moment in imagination and revise it, seeing themselves confident, recalling the questions with ease, hearing the examiner congratulate them, the emotional weight of the memory changes. The new story takes root, and the subconscious begins to build an identity around competence and achievement rather than inadequacy. In time, future experiences align with this new assumption, confirming the revised version rather than the original. Revision also applies to relationships. Someone who was betrayed may replay the betrayal endlessly, feeling the sting of it as if it happened yesterday. This repetition keeps the wound open, influencing how they trust others and even how they see themselves. But through revision, they can return to that scene in imagination and alter it. Hearing words of loyalty instead of deception, experiencing love instead of rejection. As this revised story is reinforced, the bitterness fades and a new openness emerges. Future relationships benefit because the person is no longer approaching them through the lens of old pain. The practice of revision is not about denial or pretending something never happened. It is about recognizing that the power of memory lies in the meaning attached to it. Two people may experience the same event, yet one carries it as a burden while the other uses it as motivation. Revision allows you to choose the meaning consciously rather than being bound by the one unconsciously accepted at the time. It acknowledges that the past lives only in the mind, and because it lives there, it can be reshaped. Daily revision is a powerful habit. At the end of each day, instead of rehearsing mistakes, disappointments, or arguments, you can deliberately rewrite them in imagination. If you were criticized, you imagine being praised. If you felt ignored, you imagine being noticed. If you missed an opportunity, you imagine seizing it with confidence. By doing this consistently, you prevent negative impressions from hardening into beliefs, and instead you cultivate a life shaped by encouragement, success, and joy. Each night becomes an opportunity to cleanse the day and plant seeds for a better tomorrow. Revision also dissolves the power of regret. Many people live under the weight of choices they wish they had made differently. They replay, if only, scenarios that rob them of peace in the present. But through revision, regret can be transformed into empowerment. By revisiting the scene and rewriting it with wisdom and courage, the subconscious releases the grip of guilt. The past no longer dictates self-concept, and the future opens with fresh possibilities. The effects of revision ripple outward. When you change the inner story, not only do you feel different, but others often begin to treat you differently as well. Someone who once carried the energy of victimhood may notice others respecting and valuing them more after revising painful memories. Someone who revised a story of failure may suddenly find opportunities presenting themselves as though the world is acknowledging the new self they have become. The external world mirrors the revised inner narrative. Ultimately, revision of the past is the recognition that memory is fluid and that consciousness is greater than circumstance. What is held in imagination today is more powerful than what was experienced years ago, because imagination is the creative force that shapes identity and experience. By rewriting the past in the silence of the mind, you are not escaping reality. You are creating it in you, freeing yourself from the chains of old stories and stepping into the authority of conscious authorship over your life. The greatest test of inner power is not found in moments of inspiration, but in the quiet, steady persistence of holding to a chosen vision despite appearances to the contrary. Faithful persistence is the unwavering focus on constructive inner dialogue, maintained long enough for it to reshape reality. It is the art of refusing to be swayed by temporary setbacks, discouraging evidence, or delays in manifestation. Just as a seed planted in the soil requires consistent care before breaking through the ground, so too does the seed of imagination require persistence before its fulfillment is seen in the external world. Faith is not passive waiting, it is active inner persistence. To have faith in an outcome is to sustain the inner conversation and imagery of that outcome already achieved, even when the senses report the opposite. The outer world often lags behind the inner assumption, and during this gap the temptation to give up is strongest. Yet persistence is the bridge that carries desire from unseen imagination to visible reality. Without persistence, the seed of intention is abandoned before it has time to grow, and people often misinterpret the delay as failure. Consider how many desires remain unfulfilled simply because persistence was lacking. Someone may begin affirming abundance, imagining wealth and comfort, but when bills appear or circumstances worsen, they abandon the inner conviction and return to old narratives of lack. Another person may envision love and harmony, but after a disagreement or disappointment, they allow doubt to erase their inner picture. In both cases, the lack of persistence prevents the seed from maturing into expression. Reality is always faithful to the dominant state, and persistence ensures that the desired state remains dominant until it solidifies. Persistence also requires discipline over inner dialogue. The mind is constantly speaking, rehearsing conversations, replaying scenarios, and anticipating outcomes. If left unattended, it often drifts toward fear, criticism, or doubt. Faithful persistence means redirecting this inner talk again and again toward constructive words that affirm the desired reality. It is the repeated choice to say within, I am successful, I am loved, I am secure, even when circumstances tempt you to declare the opposite. Each time you persist in the chosen dialogue, you strengthen its hold on the subconscious, and eventually the subconscious reshapes behavior, perception, and circumstance to match it. This persistence is not strained effort but calm determination. To persist does not mean to fight against the evidence of the senses with anxiety or desperation. It means to quietly and steadily dwell in the conviction of fulfillment, trusting that appearances are temporary and that reality must eventually conform. Just as a farmer does not dig up a seed each day to check its progress, one practicing persistence does not need constant proof. The inner dialogue itself is the proof, because what is sustained within must eventually be expressed without. Faithful persistence also reveals its power in the face of contradiction. Outer circumstances may even worsen after adopting a new state, not because the new state is failing, but because the old one is being dismantled. These moments test the depth of faith. Will you abandon the vision at the first sign of difficulty, or will you persist, knowing that the outer world is simply adjusting to the new blueprint? Those who persist find that the contradiction is only temporary, a shadow cast by the transformation already underway. Those who quit often declare that the principle does not work, not realizing that they abandoned it just before the breakthrough. Persistence shapes identity as much as it shapes circumstance. When you consistently affirm a new state within, over time it becomes natural. What once felt like an affirmation now feels like fact. The repetition ingrains itself into the subconscious until the new state is no longer something you are striving to believe. It is who you are. At that point, outer confirmation becomes inevitable. People, opportunities, and conditions align with the identity that persistence has forged. The power of persistence is also seen in how it neutralizes resistance. Every old belief, habit, or assumption carries momentum, and persistence is the force that eventually overcomes that momentum. Just as water wears down stone by steady flow, persistence wears down the resistance of doubt and fear. A single affirmation may not seem powerful, but repeated faithfully, it becomes an unshakable truth within the mind. Once it reaches that level, no outer circumstance can contradict it for long. Persistence must also be patient. Time is not an enemy, but a servant in the process of manifestation. The outer world moves at its own pace to reorganize itself according to the inner blueprint. Impatience often causes people to abandon their persistence, but patience is a sign of trust. To wait calmly while persisting inwardly is to demonstrate true faith. The one who persists with patience is not disturbed by how or when the desire will appear, because they know it must appear. Faithful persistence is the silent determination that transforms lives. It is the reason some achieve remarkable change, while others remain stuck in cycles of hope and disappointment. The difference is not luck or talent, but the willingness to persist in the inner conviction until the outer reflects it. The world yields not to fleeting wishes, but to sustained assumptions. What is held within with loyalty and constancy must eventually show itself without. Faithful persistence is the guarantee that constructive inner dialogue will triumph over even the most stubborn outer circumstance. So the question is not whether you are creating with your inner dialogue. You are. The real question is, what kind of world are you commanding into existence? If your life is a mirror, will you keep rehearsing fear, doubt, and lack? Or will you dare to speak within yourself words of abundance, love, and victory? Remember this. The most powerful conversation you will ever have is not with another person. It is the one you are having in your own mind right now. And that dialogue is not just talk, it is destiny.